Hello, everyone. Happy weekend. आप जहाँ से भी देख रहे हैं, आई थिंक अब तो वीकेंड ही चल रहा है पूरी दुनिया में. सो होप एवरीवन's having a great first weekend of the new year. Actually, yeah, as we had predicted in our not so happy new year 2026, things have been very things have been very interesting. मतलब बिलीव ही नहीं हो रहा कि यार सिर्फ एक ही हफ्ता हुआ है. It's इतना कुछ हो गया है, and it's like, oh my god, like it's tough to actually already you know even keep up with क्या क्या हो रहा है, क्या impact होगा, what becomes important, what's noise, what needs to be weighed, what needs to be ignored. It's already becoming a challenge. So मतलब ठीक है, I think this was more or less expected. I don't think it came as a surprise to anyone, because I believe 2026 is going to be more or less more of 2025. It'll just be 2025 Pro Max मान लो आप, क्योंकि अभी at the very minimum for the first 6 months this is gonna be a very high octane year. मतलब बहुत कुछ होगा, especially till the US midterms. It's gonna be very supercharged, and no matter what anyone else thinks or says, anyone else से मतलब any other country thinks or says, we are living in a world where might is right. And there are it's basically like there's no pretense around this anymore, right? Ki, oh, yeah, there is no, to summarize, there is no room for sloppy paper. There's no sloppy paperwork anymore. It's all basically, in Hindi there's a saying, right? Jiski lathi uski bhains. That's the quote unquote the global order that we are living through. So whether anyone likes it or not, you have powers that are going to assert themselves, and जो करना है कर लो, रोक सको तो रोक लो. बट अदरवाइज तो फिर वो ये कि आप नारेबाजी तो चलती रहेगी. there's going to be a lot of sloganeering, there's going to be a lot of, again, the content mill is going to keep spinning, but ultimately the order is going to be decided by distinct power centers, and we can discuss that as we go on in this conversation. What I really wanted to talk about is, okay, US is now operationalizing its national security strategy, the document that came out in November 2025. We have also done a detailed deep dive session on it, so please go watch that. And if you find anything useful from that, do let us know in the comments. But basically, long story short, US has made it very clear that if you're in the Western Hemisphere, you know, you have your countries, you have your cultural identities, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have to, you're gonna have to be aligned with US interests to some extent, or to a large extent. And yeah, if you don't like it, well, tough luck, you don't like it. Because this goes back to all the, Western Europe, Canada, Australia, all the countries. अब फिर वही है, आप अपनी करनी का भुगतोगे तो हो ही. You outsource your defense, you outsourced all technology, everything. And then US took the opportunity. They innovated like crazy since World War II. They also convinced everyone of their currency being the reserve. And everyone gladly signed on board with all this, right? So now it's payback time. And all the other countries that are feeling कि यार ये क्या हो रहा है, well, जब आप ये सब ट्रीटी वगैरह साइन कर रहे थे तब सोचना चाहिए था. I don't think it's all doom and gloom, in the sense that, okay, we all know what actions have happened in Venezuela. They went in, captured the president. Now, not to be very clear, right? The the Venezuelan regime is not something to be proud of anyway, right? Ki, Hugo Chavez, Maduro, these are some of the most you know corrupt people in the world. So taking them out is not something that should be considered. Well, taking them out as in taking them out of power should not be considered an entirely bad thing. But again, it was an operation that the US conducted. Now, again, if anyone is looking for an opinion, I don't think having an opinion is even relevant right now, right? वो ले गए उसे यूएस और सब देखते ही रह गए. अगर इतना ही सी ये सब जो ऑपरेशंस होते हैं, इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसीज ऑल ओवर द वर्ल्ड get the hints, right? And the fact that no one even bothered doing anything tells you that everyone's already on board, right? It's everyone's already accepted it कि हाँ ये हो रहा है. Now there are many YouTubers who are gonna give perspectives on what it means for specific countries. Like I'm originally from India. I follow a lot of Indian content, so I've been watching a lot of videos on what it means for India. But now since I do live in Canada, I am a naturalized Canadian. I also thought ki chalo, let's see what this would potentially mean for Canada and what are our options, right? ठीक है, मेरे हिसाब से आई डोंट हैव सच अ डिटेल्ड पिक्चर, बट जो मुझे दिख रहा है आई ऑल्सो फील कि यार जो द स्लोनेस इन एक्शन इन कैनेडा इट्स नॉट गोइंग अवे. मतलब चिल्ला चिल्ला के कितने लोग कितने महीनों से बोल रहे हैं भाई डाइवर्सिफाई करो इकोनॉमी को, पाइपलाइन ये वो सब जल्दी जल्दी अप्रूव करो. हो नहीं रहा है कुछ. यू नॉट सीइंग दैट मच एक्शन ऑन द ग्राउंड एज यू वुड एक्सपेक्ट, राइट? And then every Canadian goes crazy, right? As soon as Trump says, "Oh, 51st state," fine, it's okay to not want to become the 51st state, but what are you doing to make sure that that actually doesn't happen? क्या कर लोगे अगर I simply have a question to everyone, right? In everyone in Canada, hypothetically, just think about it. Hypothetically, US decides to walk in. क्या कर लोगे? कितनी देर डिफेंड कर पाओगे, right? And okay, defense में you can't modernize overnight. You can't completely get back up to speed overnight. But at least I'm glad to see that that Prime Minister Carney's administration is saying that we will get to the 5% of GDP expenditure on defense. But again, then as I mentioned before, we don't know how the NSS will actually then now play out vis-a-vis Canada. And I think the biggest concern, or the biggest talking point from a Canadian perspective will be how CUSMA gets renegotiated. So let me bring up, I actually didn't have any formal articles or agenda to share. I just wanted to share my thoughts on where we sit as Canadians. So I just want to give everyone a rundown of what has happened in this first week of the new year. Basically, I don't, a minute guys, yeah, let me hide that also for now. Yeah, so basically we know, okay, US captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. January 3rd की ये news है. Again, I'm not going to go over this. I'm just going to go over some of these headlines. Then Denmark, Greenland envoys meet with White House officials over Trump's call for a takeover. Again, takeover or not, it is safe to assume that US will be trying to increase their military presence on the island. Either it's a complete takeover of the territory and it becomes a US state, quote unquote, or It's some sort of a deal with Denmark saying, okay, we are going to be allowed to patrol with our ships, patrol with our navy. We need a base. All these things can also happen. Um, but in some form or the other, US's presence in Greenland will be near absolute. And again, as I mentioned before, it's it's good in a way what we are seeing in 2026 because we have seen such operations done by US, Russia, all the superpowers of the past in some form or the other. But there used to always be, a toffee wrapper of political correctness surrounded. Now all those masks are off, and it's basically, um, in a way, I'm glad the way President Trump came and said, okay, American oil companies are going to go to Venezuela. They're going to pump out oil. They're going to make billions and billions of dollars, and the usual spiel you get. So I'm, well, not the usual spiel as in what you usually hear from the U.S. administration, but but the way the action was justified was done in a very Trumpian style, right? So completely frank, honest, no no rappers, no political correctness, nothing. Just, yeah, we did this. We want the oil. We want to control that oil passage. It's fine. At least it gives the world a clarity on intentions, right? we're not grasping at short straws कि यार ये भी हो सकता है, नहीं शायद थोड़ा ये भी हो सकता है, नहीं नहीं बट ऐसा बोला तो शायद ये भी मीन कर सकता है. There is no ambiguity, and for that you have to actually be thankful, because in international relations where everything is always a gray area, having such a clarified statement, it's like, okay, in a way, it makes everyone's job slightly easier, right? Okay, their intentions are clear. Okay, what can you do about it? Now the focus is, okay, what do you want to do about it, rather than interpreting what could have been said, basically. So now, Denmark, Greenland envoys meet with White House officials over Trump's call for a takeover. This is again CTV news, so it'll always have a very sort of left tilt to it. But I like what I read in the article, so I was like, okay, I don't think it's too bad a representation of the actual picture. Now, as far as what the Greenlanders think, the CTV News article, they cited a poll by an institute called Verian Group. I actually, yeah, I think they are based in Denmark, and as we know, Greenland is a Danish territory, a Danish autonomous state. Basically, 85% said no. Do you want Greenland to leave the Danish realm and instead become part of the United States? So it's a very clear question, no ambiguity. Do you want Greenland to uh, become a part of the US? That's what it's saying. 85% Greenlanders have said no. 6% have said yes. 9% have said don't know. My question is, cool. 85% of Greenlanders don't want to become a part of the US. Okay, 56,000 population, little to no military prowess. Um, Again, if US were to land 5 helicopters in Nuke, क्या कर लोगे, right? So it's a time for reflection. It's a time for, you know, it's the it's in a sense, it's the price everyone pays for not innovating fast enough and just relying on one country to innovate and churn out new and new technologies. It's not just that we get a YouTube, it's not just that we get a Google, it's not just that we get Facebook or Ford cars or Chevrolet. You also get a military might that is just unparalleled in the history of the world. Not just, oh acha bhi, not just right now, right? It's just an unparalleled military power. So अब आप अपनी opinions अपने bag में रखिए, and you have to go through it. Now, the only we'll have to go through all of 2026 till the midterms happen, and after that we will see what the outcome is. But I don't think there will be a reversal in terms of policy, regardless of where Congress stands, where Senate stands, where the presidency stands. I don't think there will be a huge reversal in policy in any way. It might get softened a little bit depending on the outcome, and we might hear more of politically correct rhetoric, but in terms of the actions and policy initiatives, it's not going to change. The National Security Strategy document, वो हलवा नहीं है, वो एक एक्चुअल डॉक्यूमेंट है जिसके बेसिस पे पूरा यूएस एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन काम कर रहा है अपना. वो ओवरनाइट नहीं बदलेगा, और वो शायद अब बहुत टाइम तक नहीं बदलेगा. It's gonna stay like that, right? So I welcome the survey. I also welcome all the analysis that's been done on this, but I also don't know how much of this is how much of this will actually result in something real, something that you see on the ground, right? Now let's look at something around more oil production in Venezuela. Could hurt Canada's oil patch. See, there's a lot going on in Canada around, now we can't sell our oil to the US because Venezuelan oil will come back, right? Partly true. But the other thing is, okay, industry in Venezuela was destroyed over what, 25 years? So it won't happen overnight. That's suddenly you have Venezuelan oil flooding the world and now suddenly Canadian oil has no meaning. That won't happen. But the other side to this is, I don't even think it's necessarily an immediate problem for Canada. The immediate challenge for Canada is to extract its oil, process it within Canada so that Canadians get cheaper access to oil or gas first, right? तुमसे एक पाइपलाइन पूरी तरह अप्रूव नहीं हो रही है to BC, right? I think it's coming from, I think it's going to come to BC. So there are more immediate challenges than worrying about whether the US will want to buy your oil or not. How about you start first and foremost, have enough capacity to process your own oil within Canada and give it to Canadians, right? That in itself will give you a 5-year timeline to think about exporting to other countries later, right? Ultimately, if you become competitive enough, people will buy your oil. It doesn't matter. You'll have Venezuelan oil in the market, you'll have American oil in the market, you'll have Canadian oil in the market, you'll have Middle Eastern oil in the market, Russian oil in the market. You know, broadly speaking, these are the 5 major regions that are oil producing in the world, and they will all compete for pricing. So I think first and foremost, Canada should focus more on, okay, we have a lot of crude, we should have the refining capability, at least for what we get out of our oil sands, the grade of crude we get, and at least supply to Canadians. I mean, if our oil prices drop, that is a huge incentive for Canadians to start innovating, because it's simple. It's more disposable income in the pockets of Canadians, more incentives for Canadians to actually, start building companies here, right? See, oil affects the whole supply chain at the end of the day. So if the price of oil becomes reasonable all across Canada, it comes down to $1 a liter. I don't know. I'm just saying it is possible for Canada to have that cheap oil. Like, you go to UAE, you go to Saudi Arabia, oil is actually cheap because they produce so much. Yeah, they give it to the world, but they also give it to their own societies because they have the refining capability. So अब लोग आके मुझे बोलेंगे ओ अब तो नॉर्थ अमेरिका में लॉज इतने स्ट्रिक्ट हो गए हैं, रिफाइनरी बनाना इम्पॉसिबल हो गया है. ये सब बहाने हैं. आपने आपने जो सब कुछ पिछले 10-15 साल में ब्लेटेंटली आउटसोर्स कर दिया है फॉर सम सॉर्ट ऑफ अ फूलिश गोल लाइक नेट ज़ीरो, अब आप उसका भुगत रहे हो. अब आप उसका अब आप उसका अब आप उसका इंटरेस्ट पे कर रहे हो. तो जितनी जल्दी हो सके फिगर इट आउट. मतलब एट दिस पॉइंट देयर इज नो अदर way to say it. Yeah, your laws are complicated, fine, make them easier. Or your regulations, this, that. I mean, see, this is what happens when you when you start sort of grappling for an identity, because we had an administration that was actively pursuing something called a post nation state for whatever that meant. But the end result of that is there are so many small groups. Canada has a population of 42 million people. मतलब 4.5 crore लोग से कम है यहाँ पे. And इतने small groups, 10,000 people, 50,000 people, just people can't come on the same page to think for Canada. And now it's at your doorstep. And if everyone thinks what that doorstep looks like, let's take a quick look at, a map. एक minute, guys. Let me pull that up first. ये मुझे Okay, let me change this screen share. ये मैं करता हूँ. So here is Canada, here is US, the bottom 48 as they are called. Here is Alaska, so that is US territory. And here is Greenland, which may soon pretty much be a US territory, right? Either they buy it, either they forcefully take it by military, or either they just increase their presence to a point that it might as well be called the US, even though it's technically, there are too many things that can happen. But for now, I think it is safe to assume that this will more or less be US as well, right? So apart from these two piddly islands of which are I think ये जो हैं, this is technically France. But anyways, so Canada more or less has only one neighbor at that point, which is the US, right? We have access to the Arctic Ocean. We have access to the Atlantic and the Pacific, because we do stretch the entire continent. So we have access to ocean routes. But obviously, since currently there's no free trade agreement among the provinces, every little thing takes a mountain of time compared to the population, which is like 42 million and nothing. But you are surrounded by the US on all three sides. I will show you another country that is surrounded by one country on all three sides. Again, they have a small border with Myanmar, but I'm talking about Bangladesh, right? Surrounded by India on all three sides, except a small line with Myanmar right here, right? And those who know the sort of geopolitical realities of this area is Bangladesh does end up depending a lot on India for electricity, sometimes port access, etc., 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 right? Just simply because geography, right? Three sides, you're surrounded by one country. You're gonna have to have, there's gonna be reliance you just can't get rid of. maybe you could say Bangladesh की situation थोड़ी और tight है because there's only access to one ocean or one sea, which is the Bay of Bengal. But again, this literally opens up to every major population center in the world except the US, which becomes a little far. So I'll come back here. Once you are basically surrounded by the US, it'll get more and more challenging for you to have any solid negotiation power on deals like CUSMA that is going to come up this year. And that is just a reality Canadians will have to face, right? It's not a hypothetical anymore. Again, I'm not going to say ki, oh, overnight we'll become 51st state. I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, at the negotiation table, it'll be a much more challenging negotiation table for us. Matlab, now, previously at least you could say, okay, Arctic में हम आपको Arctic passage का आसान कर सकते हैं. You could have done a deal with the Arctic passage, but if US basically controls Greenland, then you have no leverage on the Arctic left, right? Then basically it becomes what we had in the Cold War years, that you have Russia and, well, if you consider this as US, then you have Russia and US. They control the Arctic, live with it, right? And I think this wake up call has been happening. Not even, I think this is even before the US elections, right? This is before President Trump's second term. We put in so many policies on some idealistic, some intangible ideal, that we just paused our economy, and now we are facing those consequences of having very little to be able to negotiate with. Now, IMF report has said that Canada did not suffer as much as expected from the tariffs, but that's because I think 85% of exports to the US, or Canadian exports to the US, are actually protected under CUSMA. And President Trump has made it clear he doesn't mind if it expires. He doesn't mind if it doesn't get renegotiated. We don't know to what extent it's just a statement versus it's reality. From what we have seen with US actions in Venezuela and US's intended actions in Greenland, I don't think we can take it lightly. And we shouldn't be, right? You have the leader of the most powerful country in the world making a statement. You don't take it lightly, and you don't go around thinking that, okay, this won't happen just because there is some sort of a world order that everyone was adhering to for 50 odd years. All right, maybe, 80 odd years since 1945, if you had to see it that way. So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap this up, but just everyone, please keep this, at least all Canadians, keep this image in mind. For now, the only safe conclusion we can draw is that it'll be a tougher negotiation table, even hypothetically, even without anything, and without any US presence in Greenland. It's anyways a tougher negotiation table just because our oil becomes less competitive. But as I mentioned earlier, that shouldn't even be a bother right now. The whole thing is, okay, at least give Canadians cheap oil. Bring it down to $1 a liter. Why not? And then you will see that when things get cheaper within Canada, it'll just become, Canadians will feel more free to be able to try and start carrying out more economic activity, not just real estate all the time, not just some fluff services. There'll be real things. People will try to start establishing companies which will be manufacturing some cutting edge technology. At least that way the country gets revived economically. and from there we have a long road ahead, and hopefully that road is Canada sticks to that road for like next 50 or 100 years, so that we can then regain our so-called uh, respect status, whatever you want to call it. uh, in the long run, we can regain that. We can regain the status of a respected, developed country. It's still developed. I don't think anyone's life here is that bad, but it's still developed. But we just start getting the respect that we used to get earlier. All right, guys. I think that's all I have for today. 8 minute, guys. Yeah, there's lots of issues with this. Anyways, guys, that's all I had for today. I don't want to drag on and on about this things that you probably have already been watching a lot of videos on. But yeah, and maybe I think we should remember that no matter what the situation, if you just flip it, you'll always be able to see a positive side to it. As I mentioned earlier, at least now we have clarity on what the new world order would look like. There is no ambiguity left. And I'm pretty sure if I could sit and read the national security strategy document, people in Ottawa have read it, dissected it left, right, and center. So for most of them, maybe US's action in Venezuela maybe didn't even come as a surprise, and US's expected actions in Greenland will also not come as a surprise. So given the actions till now of the Carney administration, I do have hope, but I do know that regardless of what happens or doesn't happen, we have a tougher negotiation table for NAFTA, CUSMA, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, guys, we'll be following this very closely, because this is going to be the hottest news topic in Canada throughout this year. At the very minimum throughout this year, and then perhaps for the next 3 years. So, all right, we'll wrap up here, and yeah, have a great rest of the weekend, everyone. Enjoy your time. Chalo, bye bye.